Chargers go. Way to save the season to throw. Fire down! Incomplete down at the goal line by San Diego. Tomlinson off the left side. Tomlinson sidestep. Hello, history books. Think they have to now. Here's Sproles. Sproles inside the 10, inside the 5, and the Chargers win the game. Charger fans are witnesses to history.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition After Hours. Gang's all here. Jamie, Craig, we're all here. And boy, I think we're going to need the chat to carry us today because I don't know that we have an hour's worth to talk about during that game. But Chargers win. Chargers win. They get the win in New England on the road, which they haven't done in a while. They pitched the shutout. They got the win, which is important.
Yeah, over the Pats, first time since 2008. So, I mean, even though it was a destitute Patriots team, a win is a win, as I'm sure everyone on Twitter will tell you. So, yay.
Yeah, I mean, a win is a win. Did we want them to win this one? I'm not sure we did. I'm not sure it does them any good, but they got some good play out of the defense, and they did barely enough to win on offense. Got some help by some bad plays by the Patriots offense too, but pulled one out.
Yes. Now, if they lost this one, there was obviously bigger ramifications, which those of you that are part of the Discord know. But they won this one, which means it does hurt their draft stock. If you're on the side of hoping they win out and get a playoff spot, they improve their chances that way. But yeah, it was almost like the Chargers wanted to lose less today than the Patriots because, I mean, 6-0 was just a slog of a game. It was hard to watch, even as somebody who's got to finish it so we could talk about it. But anybody who spent their Sunday watching that thing, hats off to you, man. That was a rough one.
I'm just glad I could fast forward through it, and I didn't have to sit and watch it
Right.
live.
You didn't watch it live like the rest of us.
I knew what happened because I was following from tryouts, but luckily I could fast forward through the commercials and kind of speed my way through the game, so that helped quite a bit.
Well, I unfortunately, along with Garrett, sat there and watched that nonsense. And yeah, when I say torture by felt like a million paper cuts, it was so difficult to maintain, well, really consciousness and finish the game first and foremost, but also just finding anything positive to take away from it. I mean, there were some, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but as a whole, that was just a rough watch against a terrible team. So once again, you take a win away from it, you look at all the factors inclusive of the weather, and you can make whatever excuses help you sleep at night. But the end all be all here is Chargers got another win, albeit against a not great team. And I don't know what the future looks like, but I don't think you should take very much from that win.
So you're saying there's some good stuff. Why don't you kick us off, Craig? What good did you take away from that game?
Khalil Mack is a maniac at 32 years old, and there's two sides to this. He's having what might actually be his best career year, potentially at 32, and it may all be wasted. That is the flip side to it. But watching this man perform and the effort that he puts in, and thinking about what that would look like on a team that kind of deserves it, you can't minimize what his accomplishments are to this point. What is he at? 15 sacks to this point, I believe, 14, 15. I don't even remember what Joey's highest sack total was in a single season, but I would not be surprised if 32-year-old Khalil Mack clears that. And then we're talking about, again, another situation when we come to the end of the season where you have to consider keeping him around, and you should. Keenan Allen went over 100 receptions on the year. So another guy, 31 years old, leading the league in receptions and top 3 in reception yards. So those are my takeaways. If you want to talk a little bit about Herbert, definitely not a perfect game. I guess all things considered, including weather, lack of weapons. I mean, he played decently. I wouldn't say it was an amazing performance by any means, but ultimately made some key throws, also missed some really big ones. Guys kind of let him down with some drops as well, but he didn't make any. I mean, there was like 1 or 2 throws that could have been turnovers, but for the most part, took care of the ball. And special teams, there's that as well. Awesome kicking job when we're talking about Dicker and talking
J.K.
with
Scott.
J.K. Scott with
He
some
doesn't
amazing
matter.
punts,
He's
by
just-
the way.
Don't worry.
Yeah,
about it.
it's fine. I always forget J.K. Scott's name, but I think today was probably one of his best performances ever. That coffin punt that he had to the 1 yard line of the Patriots, I didn't even know he was capable of that. I think he boomed like a 62 yarder, which is just kind of like, wow. And then you had a really great 30+ yard return by Darius Davis that put the Chargers in plus territory as well. So that's what I got. Oh, an offensive line held up pretty well protection wise. Run, different story, but protection, they kept Herbert relatively clean for the most part all game long. So yeah, all that.
Yeah, I thought the offensive line, obviously not in the running game, but in terms of pass protection, the offensive line was really good today. Probably the best they played as a unit, start to finish in a game since Corey Linsley got hurt. Herbert helped them by getting out of the pocket a few times and climbing the pocket and avoiding sacks. But overall, I was really worried about Josh Uche going up against Pipkins on third down. I was worried about Christian Barmore inside getting a lot of pressure. Herbert, for the most part, had some pretty clean pockets and had a lot of time to sit back, survey the field, and find open receivers. They weren't often getting open, but he had time to look for them.
Mhm.
So I think the offensive line deserved a lot of credit. I think, for all of the shit he's taken from us and from everybody the last few weeks, Quentin Johnston deserves a lot of credit for the game he played. I know he had a key drop at the end of the game, but 5 catches on 7 targets, made some big catches for them. There was a huge 3rd and long catch. Right after, by the way, Herbert just completely ignored him on 2nd down, wide open on a drag. That would have been an easy first down. He beats J.C. Jackson down the right sideline, makes a big catch for 27 yards to pick up a key first down. So we saw some physical catches from Quentin Johnston. We saw him make a play down the field. We saw him make some plays with the ball in his hands. So Johnston deserves a lot of credit for the game that he played. Easily his best game as a Charger, in my opinion. Asang Bassi, who I was shocked to see playing the slot over Derwin pretty much the whole game. I thought he played really well. He had one penalty that I thought was kind of ticky-tack, but he made a couple plays on the football. He was physical tackling. He was sticky in coverage, played really well in the slot. And they dialed up some really good pressure in the second half. They weren't really getting at Zappe at all in the first half. And the front 7 did a really good job, and Derwin did a really good job of creating pressure in the second half and making things difficult on Zappe when they had a chance to come back in the game.
Yeah, to go back to your question, Craig,
Mm-hmm.
and it was answered by Kim, and I lost it, but there it is. Joey Sakai is 12.5.
Oh, well, actually lower than what I thought. Thanks, man.
Yeah, and let's get to this question, and then we'll tag on to that. So from Charles Michael Sinclair, is the shine off Kellen Moore jet sweep? And of course, he's talking about the jet sweep to Austin Eckler on 3rd down. We got a really bad 3rd down call with Herbert that got blown up really easily. How are you feeling about Moore? That's back-to-back games where the offense just could not get going.
I'm not happy with the offense. I think there's a lot of things not to be happy about. Continuing to try to run the ball on 1st and 2nd down when you can't run it. I've been waiting for that RPO play with Herbert on the edge, or read option with Herbert on the edge on 3rd down all season. I don't know why it took them so long to call it. I didn't mind the call. The Patriots were just ready for it. So sometimes those things don't work out, but I've been wanting to do that more often all season. The thing that really bothers me, though, is going in, the Patriots are going to play a lot of man defense. They're going to play man coverage. They're going to dare you to beat their guys one-on-one. You also know the Chargers don't create a lot of separation. So you need to do things to help guys get open. And I think what really bothered me was outside of a handful of plays here and there, they really didn't do anything to help guys get open. You know, they put Keenan in motion at times, which was good. Didn't really see a lot of pick or rub routes. They weren't creating a lot of mesh points further down the field, making guys pick who they're, communicate and trade off and pass guys off down the field. They didn't do anything to create any real confusion. They just went out and did what they always do, and they couldn't get open. Shocker. So it just seemed like they weren't prepared for what is a pretty predictable man coverage scheme by the Patriots. They run it really well, and they've got a really versatile secondary, but they weren't ready for it. They didn't do anything to help those guys get open. And that to me is just, it's a coaching failure. If I can see that stuff on film, you would expect that Kellen Moore would be able to see it on film and dial some of that up. And they just didn't do it. They were just waiting for guys who haven't gotten open all year to get open. And we see the result.
It's really frustrating at this point. So if you're asking me, then yeah, I think the luster's worn off of the whole Kellen Moore situation. And he didn't do himself any favors with regard to potential, whether it's an interim job or a head coaching position next season. I think he's digging himself quite a hole. I get it. The Chargers are lacking some weapons, multiple weapons. We don't want to overlook that. I don't think it can be understated. It shouldn't be understated. The problem here is that there's no real adjustment to utilize the ones that you do have. We've been screaming every week for Gerald Everett to be more involved, and you see flashes here and there, but it's not overly consistent. When talking the running game, I think they started off the game with a pass play on the first possession. So they didn't run it on first down. I think actually, to be honest with you, I think there was only one rush attempt in that first drive. But then as the game went on, they became exceedingly more conservative. And my concern here is that now we are in our second offensive coordinator, and this is a trend no matter what. The Austin Eckler situation isn't working out between the tackles specifically, and it's not all his fault. I'm seeing, and I can't wait to rewatch this again, it looks like on almost every rushing attempt, there's someone who's blowing an assignment. At least one person, but sometimes two. And I can't understand how it happens on each and every running play. I can't necessarily put that on Kellen Moore because there's execution issues there. Wide receivers were missing blocks as well. Like, all that happens. But as far as Moore is concerned, you're not catching teams off guard with this running game, because what you have to understand as the offensive coordinator then is even if you're calling a good play, your guys haven't proven that they can execute it. So it's probably going to get stopped anyway. Jamie, you mentioned that quarterback option play. That actually works if he hands it off to Eckler. I think it's like third and three.
It was third and three. Yeah.
He hands that ball off. Eckler has about at least 3 yards ahead of him. I think there was someone at the second level that flashed late, but he probably gets to at least the line to gain there. But yeah, the Patriots sat on that. They did a really, really good job with like snuffing the play out and looking for Herbert. But as far as Kellen Moore, it's really frustrating when you also look at even the sudden change situations. Like in the forced fumble Thule created, you come right off of that and then you run the ball 3 straight times. Mm-hmm. Again, I understand that it's raining. I get all of that. But you've already proven all season long that your running game doesn't work to any effect whatsoever. Why not take a shot there? Why not try to create a big play? At least attempt to get the ball down the field vertically. Make the Patriots get off of their heels and defend the deep part of the field, because guess what? Once that starts happening, your running game might work a little bit better. Guys won't be sitting, especially at the second level, shooting gaps, getting guys in the backfield. Of course, your offensive linemen are going to have to win their one-on-ones, but I would imagine that every once in a while that can happen. But with no running game whatsoever and Kellen Moore not being able to, I guess, scheme it up properly, or even in the passing game, the offense is probably going to be stuck in the mud when you're this one-dimensional. So I just expected more from Kellen with regard to creativity. And he still won't. He refuses to use players in situations that may be more advantageous to the offense. Darius Davis is just not a part of the passing game. He still won't try to stretch the field with him. And you got 50-50 balls to Jalen Guyton. Hell, you might as well throw that to QJ. You got probably about the same odds as him coming down with it as Guyton. But Kellen just isn't doing himself any favors, again, with regard to a future as a head coach. And I always said this, and I'll say it again. You don't have a handle on the offense. How can you manage a team overall? So I don't think he's doing himself any real favors here.
Yeah, I think the shine is definitely off. I mean, there's that you're alluding to, there's a rumor this week that the Panthers are looking at hiring Kellen Moore as a head coach next season. And, everybody everywhere that's watched the Charger game is like, why? Yeah, go for it. I mean, we're watching the Cowboys absolutely go off right now offensively. So it's not that Moore was propelling this offense. It's just that Dak and CeeDee Lamb are a pretty good tandem, and that Cowboys offense is pretty good. And they got a pretty good offensive line to boot. So, you can argue that there's some issues with the running game and he can't get anything going, and there's been some offensive line issues. But I mean, come on, today was just bad. It's ugly. This Patriots team is absolutely awful. That jet sweep call where it was 3rd and 6, by the way, and you're asking Austin Eckler, who we watched go down the sideline and run like 2 miles per hour down that sideline. You're going to ask him to run sideline to sideline, turn a corner, and go upfield? He lost more yards than he was supposed to gain on that play. It was a loss of 7. That was a terrible play call. The the RPO, I mean, obviously, hindsight being what it is, it did feel like if he handed that ball off, it could have been a first down, but they read that thing from Herbert the whole way. But that very next drive, Craig talked about that 3 runs in a row junk. I mean, they can't get 10 yards in 3 plays, in 3 runs back to back. That's just not happening with this offensive line or this running game. So to do that is silly. But then that play after the keeper that didn't go, it was a 3rd and 2, and they decided to run it again. It's like it's not working. They don't have a good enough running game or a good enough. They're not blocking good enough up front to get 2 yards. They can maybe get the 1, and they did that, I think, 2 times during the game today. But to keep on handing the ball off, and quite honestly, to continue to run the ball early on first down, like every single time, to nail the message home that, hey, we're going to run it. It's not going to be effective, but we're going to still do it. I mean, you're putting yourself behind the chains constantly. So the creativity isn't there. I mean, the fact that they've been so bad the last 2 games offensively is now the Ravens, again, has a good defense, but there is no excuse, rain or not. I mean, in the snow, you're putting up 20 points against this Patriots team. The rain, I mean, come on. This offense just is not good enough, and Kellen Moore is just not helping out at all.
I mean, 24 carries, 29 yards.
Yeah, it's not acceptable.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable. The Patriots are bad. They're mostly bad because of their offense. They do have a good defense, and they've been holding teams under 14 points for like their last 2 or 3 games. They are playing very well, and the Chargers don't have a lot of skill players to lean on right now. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say the Patriots.
They played the Giants and the Colts, though.
True, but the Chargers don't have any skill players besides Keenan. So,
but I'm saying they gave up 31 to the Dolphins, like 29 to the Bills, like 21 to the Raiders, 34 to the Saints. I mean, I'm just saying this. Yeah, they did do good the last couple of weeks, but still, I just feel like 6 points is just not okay.
No, 6 points is not okay. Definitely not. I'm not saying that.
But you're saying the 20 points in the snow was a little much?
Maybe a little bit of an overstatement. Maybe just a little.
Okay. All right.
The other thing I would point out too is, they're 3 or 4 plays away from putting up 20 plus points on the Pats. Early in the second quarter, they're driving. Everett beats Jalen Mills up the numbers on the left side of the field. He's wide open. He's got 2 or 3 yards of separation. All Herbert has to do is lead him towards the pylon, and it's at least a 1st and goal. It's probably a touchdown, but he throws it over his right shoulder instead of over his left shoulder, and you wind up getting the pass broken up and almost intercepted. That should have been 6. The throw was short, and it was to the wrong side. The very next play, he's throwing a jump ball to Keenan, and he underthrows that by a good 3 yards and hits the defensive back in the back. You have Parham dropping that deep over on the first drive, the first drive of the second quarter. I mean, and again, not a great throw. Parham was wide open in the middle of the field with 2 or 3 yards of separation. Herbert is staring him down, and he's wide open, and he waits until Duggar catches up, and then he throws it behind him and over his inside shoulder and gives Duggar a chance to make a play on the ball. And then there was that 3rd and 12 to QJ that he dropped after Herbert got out of the pocket and put the ball right on him. You know, you convert 2 of those plays, you probably score 20 points in the game. You convert 3 of those plays, and you're talking about a totally different feel of the game. So I don't think Moore called a great game. I think overall the play calling was atrocious and a little timid. But I do think there were opportunities for them to score some points, and they just didn't make it happen. They just didn't execute. And it's been, whether it's on offense or defense, execution has been a problem with them all year. And it's been a consistent problem with them, I mean, since forever, certainly since 2014, since they hired Mike McCoy, all the way through Lynn, all the way through Staley. You've just always got one unit letting the other one down, letting the other 2 down in some phase of the game. And they just can't seem to overcome that.
You talk about a team that can't get out of its own way. Unforced errors like galore. I think there were 6 drops total today, if I'm not mistaken. I might be underselling it. But even like, as Jamie mentioned, if they get about 2 of those, 2 or 3 of those are receptions, just even the box score, because I know people are going to look at that and care. Herbert's numbers look dramatically different, I believe. You're talking about possibly a 300-yard day, maybe at least 1 TD, but he was missing. His accuracy was pretty shoddy throughout the game. But when he was hitting them, guys were just literally like, the issue here with QJ, it sullies him. The drop on 3rd and 12 sullies his day because he was playing very well. I think we were all really encouraged by the fact that he had gone on those first 5 receptions. He looked comfortable. He looked aggressive. He didn't seem like he was thinking about catching the ball. I mean, it still didn't look overly natural, but by the same token, he was getting his hands on the ball in less than ideal weather situation, and he was moving the chains. I mean, there was a screen pass that he took where you saw that run after catch ability where he helped to extend the drive. But that 3rd and 12, man, when you're having the season that he's had, things like that will overshadow almost any good you do, because it's the last image you have of him in the game, by the way, because I don't think they targeted him again after that. So great effort by him early on, and I definitely want to give him props, as we have here already. But that last drop, man, it was brutal. And overall, just when we're talking about offensively speaking, I don't know where this team goes, because yes, the Patriots have a pretty good defense, but just moving forward, if you can't depend on your number 1 guy, who is actually still playing through a quad injury, by the way, so he wasn't 100%, and you've got your number 2 option in Austin Eckler, who can't get it going on the ground, and again, he had another drop today in the receiving game, which is completely ridiculous. The offense is going to be stuck in the mud until they at least figure out how to have some semblance of a running game, and I'm saying this because, not that I'm hoping that they will do it, because I don't believe it's ever going to happen, but you can't go back to the drawing board after this game and not think that you have to try to come up with some sort of schematic adjustments to where every time you attempt to run the ball, it gets stuffed, and you're putting your offense in situations where they're having to play behind the sticks, and you're asking your quarterback to go out there and deal to only 1 or 2 viable options in the passing game. That's not realistic. It's not sustainable. And I mean, overall, your offense is going to pay for it in the long run. But I mean, you're definitely not doing your quarterback any favors. Can't expect the offensive line to hold up like this the remainder of the year. I mean, it would be great, but they're going to run into a couple of defensive lines that can really get after it. So I don't know. I know we're sitting here talking about a win as if we lost the game, but I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of positive to take away from it, to be completely honest.
Yeah, Tommy DeVito shouldn't be putting up more points than Justin Herbert. That just shouldn't happen in the NFL, not with a good offense. And yeah, I mean, and to the fact that at the end of the game, because nobody's getting any real separation, and I do want to commend QJ because he did have a good game. The drops, it is so mental. Like as soon as he dropped that ball, it was like the end of the world. He took off his helmet. You could tell he was affected by it every single time. He is not a drop it, move on, and forget about the last play type of guy. He lets it affect him. Like he's going through it right now with all these drops. And yes, he did have a good game. There was one play in particular that I really didn't think he did very good on, and that was where he had inside leverage and he cut inside and still let JC Jackson get inside of him. When you have a step on a guy like JC Jackson, you should be able to separate. He just could not separate on that route. And I think Justin Herbert needed to lead him a little bit more, but he couldn't get open. And how about, what do you guys think about Alex Erickson being kind of the clutch performer for like 2 weeks now in a game where a play they had to have it, a have to have it type of play? They go to Alex Erickson, who gets a game ball and had one single catch the entire game.
Yeah, just so in terms of Erickson, I mean, good for him, I guess. I mean, getting a game ball after one catch is a little ridiculous. It seems like we're handing out participation trophies at this point.
JK got one too. Punter got one.
Matt could have got one. Thule had a big play and forced a fumble.
Kendricks
we mentioned QJ having his best game of the season. There are a lot of guys who deserved a game ball. So for Erickson to get it after one play, little silly to me. It's like we're trying to force it at this point. It kind of feels like, I mean, I've been there, not to compare the NFL to, 8U girls softball, but I've been there after a game where you're like, okay, we lost 12-0 and nobody hit the ball. Yeah. I'm going to give it to Sally because she cheered really loud in the dugout.
Right.
And that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah. Being a good teammate, you need those.
It's a little ridiculous at this point. Khalil Mack not getting one. It almost feels like Staley went out of his way to try to get some of the guys who go less recognized, something to mount on their fireplaces at home or something. I mean, great. It's a feel-good victory. You have to find them where you can. J.K. Scott, I'm actually okay with him getting a game ball. He punted the hell out of it tonight, and it was necessary. It was necessary because it was a field position game. So he flipped the field a couple times. Totally understand that. Alex Erickson, I was under the impression that I missed something else that he did. No. Honestly, I had to go back and look. I'm like, there had to have been something else. Was there something on special teams that I not catch? Like, nah, just, good catch to end the game, pal. Yeah. Cool. Staley's reaching. He's reaching. So, yeah, I mean, I guess if you want to give him, a game ball for being the guy that gets the clincher catch, then cool. But it's much. It's a reach. But
he did hand out like 3 or 4 today, I think.
Yeah, Staley's just kind of, I don't know, man. I don't want to bag on him right now. It's too easy.
It feels like the highlights of the game feels like Alex Erickson making one catch at the end of the game, J.K. Scott getting a punt to the 1-yard line, and then Darius Davis's 34-yard return. And that was like the highlights for me. I know defensively there was some good stuff, but it was like those plays like helped affect the game in some way, even though Darius Davis's play didn't result in anything other than a field goal. But man, that's just how like terrible this game was to watch.
Question: Do you have to give out game balls? Is that like something that Staley's made a thing? Like, is like after every game we have to give it to someone? It doesn't matter what happened. Like, we just have to recognize someone so they feel special.
Of course not. No, they don't have to. But also they lost 3 in a row and they got one on the road and they haven't won there since 2007 or whatever it was. And they pitched a shutout. He was feeling good about it.
You mentioned that slant for QJ where he beat JC Jackson inside. You were saying he needs to separate and make that play. I think if you go back and look at that, I think you'll find out that when JC got beat, he grabbed some jersey and he used the jersey for leverage to get himself back into the play. I thought it was PI. It didn't get called. There were a couple plays like that where guys got grabbed from behind and there was no call. It happens on every play, but there's a reason he didn't separate.
Okay.
Oh, you mean the refs screwed the pooch again? Because there was also one very obvious play where that took place, and I'm sure no one's happy about that one. Because it was probably going to be the one that I was under the impression that was going to end up costing the Chargers the game, just based on how games have gone. But they figured it out and got around it. But
so let's talk about that play, because I think there's a couple of different points to make here. One is kudos to Brandon Staley for having the foresight to challenge that play, because he was 100% right. I would say since he's been the Chargers coach, it seems like almost every play he's challenged has been like, dude, what are you doing? There's no point in challenging this. But that one, he got that 100% right. You could see Nick Williams' pinky finger bend back when he tips the ball. Not only that, but live, the ball lost its spiral. The spin completely changed, and the trajectory of the ball changed. There is no way you can look at that on film and tell me that ball did not get tipped. So kudos to Staley for seeing it and understanding the importance of the play and challenging it, because I think a lot of coaches probably let that go. And shame on the refs for just completely fucking that up, because that is as obvious as it gets. It was obvious live, and then there were at least 3 angles that showed it clearly that he tipped it. One that showed his finger bending back. You can't miss that. You just can't. And it was such a quick review too, for them to come back and say that it wasn't tipped. I just don't get it. I mean, you got Gene Steratore on the broadcast saying, "Oh yeah, congratulations to the refs. They got it right.
Yeah.
They reversed the call." And they're like, no,
good
Gene.
challenge. Yeah.
They blew the call. They said it wasn't tipped. And
someone said, I can't remember who it was. Someone actually said, well, salute to the cameraman for actually catching it. And
it was Steratore. He was like,
okay.
Props to the cameraman for catching it, and props to the officials for getting the call right, because it was clearly tipped, and that negates the penalty.
Yeah.
Direct quote, pretty much.
It's becoming a weekly thing. I think we're actually catching this. There's at least one game-changing blown call by the refs that are like either affecting. I think it's happened a lot on offensive drives, but today that could have flipped the entire game on its head. You're talking about giving a team momentum. I want to say, I can't remember exactly what drive that happened on. I think that might have been like the Pats' best offensive drive of the day where that occurred potentially. And again, I could be off on my timing, but I think what saved the drives were those back-to-back sacks by was that Kendricks, and then not Kendricks. What's the guy's name?
Derwin?
No. No, literally a guy they just
Justin Hollins.
Hollins and then Mac.
That was a different drive. Different drive.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. But yeah, just saying that in general, we're talking about these plays that are happening pretty much every game where the refs are essentially screwing the pooch and putting the Chargers in situations that either cost them points or giving teams the opportunity to continue drives. And we know that the defense, as well as it performed today, in clutch moments, does have a tendency to give up a play or two. And when the offense isn't going great, they're asking a lot of the defense, and that could have been another one of those missed calls that turned the entire game around. So
and that drive could have been really dangerous, because it started with Devontae Parker with a 2-hand shove on Dean Leonard on a back shoulder throw, and they called Leonard for pass interference. Then they missed the tip pass. Then I think the next play is a deep ball down the sideline to Parker, who again pushes off, and thankfully he goes out of bounds. And I was shocked they didn't call pass interference on Leonard, because he had 2 hands on Parker again. But that drive had typical Chargers blowing the lead drive written all over it. And we're sitting here talking about a shutout, which is great, but I mean, Leonard got beat bad twice in one possession. A previous possession, he got beat by Thornton, who has 5 catches all year, and was really lucky Thornton dropped the ball, because that's 6 if he catches that. It was a perfect throw. We talked earlier about the offense. They make 2 or 3 plays. You're talking about them scoring 20 to 24 points, most likely, maybe 27. The Pats are 2 plays away from putting up a 14-6 win and shutting down the Chargers. So
are we really talking about Bailey Zappi and the Pats setting up downfield shots for him, but Justin Herbert can't get a shot down the field? Like, that is so ridiculous to me, that they can. I mean, do the Pats actually have an offensive coordinator right now, or is that like I think someone's doing that in tandem with someone else? I don't know if they have one in title, an OC in title, or not. But that offense is complete trash.
I know
they're willing.
What's his name?
Bill O'Brien.
Bill O'Brien is their offensive coordinator.
Okay, so maybe it's a different position. Maybe it's on the opposite side of the ball. I know that there's somewhere on the team where they don't have official coordinator for some phase of the game. I don't know if it's DC or what. Don't exactly.
It's defensive coordinator. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just long story less long on that one. The fact that they're able and willing to scheme up deep shots with that quarterback, but the Chargers can't seem to get in a position where they can give one of the most talented quarterbacks in the game with the arm that he has an opportunity to get the ball down the field it's another indictment on the offense. But, I digress. Yeah,
they did end up getting the stop on 4th down on that tip pass. But, man, I was thinking the same thing, though. I can't believe that angle, like shooting down the line of scrimmage, to get that at the perfect angle to see his finger bend back. I mean, that was so clear cut, and you don't see like that. Usually it felt like the first couple angles they were showing us, Zappe just threw a duck. It felt like he just had a terrible ball. But then when they showed it down the sideline and they showed Nick Williams getting a ring finger on it, I mean, I don't know how they caught that. I immediately, when he threw that red flag, I thought Staley was making a boneheaded challenge that made no sense. And, but yeah, I commend him for that call because that was big. That one, and then I remember the QJ catch where they called it incomplete, where he got his hand underneath the ball, and they ended up getting that. That was a good challenge too. But yeah, I mean, boy. Oh, also Thornton. What about that? I was very surprised. That end around to Thornton, I thought was going to get taken to the house, where Gilbin misses the tackle.
Did he whiff?
Running down the sideline, I could, and then he cuts back inside Asante Samuel Jr. I could have sworn they were gonna take the lead there. That was huge, but ended up getting a stop, and then they got the sack on 4th down from Derwin, which was huge. Yeah,
Derwin saved the day on that drive. Thank goodness, because I haven't. I can't wait to go back and rewatch it. Actually, the angle that Alohi took looked good. And then he just whiffs in the most unathletic way. He essentially just kind of puts an arm out, and it looks like he had just given up on the play. Like, Alohi Gilman overrunning a play is weird in the first place because of the angle that he had, and the sideline essentially was his friend. If he just angles more to the inside, at the very least, he makes contact and knocks Thornton out of bounds. But he takes an outside angle, misses, and allows the cut back to the inside. That is when you're talking about just guys actually practicing the basics of the game and understanding fundamentals, you can't come downhill and miss that way. For every good play that Alohi makes, when you see him operate in space like that, and you remember, oh wow, that dude probably shouldn't be a starting safety in the league. But it was pretty ridiculous. But thank goodness for Derwin for being the saving grace on that drive.
I just want to show you guys this because this is really sweet. This is from Wheelie, who says, "Thankfully for you guys, my new tradition is spending Sunday nights listening to you guys trash our frustrating team while I feed my newborn. It's honestly therapeutic, and I'm glad. They're gonna learn some curse words, your baby, but we'll try and keep it as clean as we can." Yeah, and I think you're muted, Jamie. Also. There's a question here about from Cade. When should we push the panic button on Herbert? Are the haters right about him? I would say no to the second part, but when should we start to push the panic button here?
Panic? Panic is a strong word. I think, as we have said many times on many shows, there are areas where he can certainly improve. I think sometimes the reads aren't great. I think sometimes the ball placement isn't great. There are times where it seems like he's aiming balls when guys are wide open and he's just not letting it rip. He certainly gets locked into Keenan at times. I don't think he's having as many of the issues with like particular coverages as he was early in his career. Like, it doesn't seem like he's as befuddled by cover 2 and cover 6 as he was early on. He seems like he's starting to hit some of those holes. But I think what it's really boiling down to, and I had hoped this would be the case, I think he's just not getting really good coaching. I think Lombardi the last 2 years and having Shane Day as a quarterback coach has really hurt him. It just doesn't seem like he's getting real great instruction with what to expect. I think he's reading things pretty well in terms of the blitz and things like that for the most part, but there's just some holes in his game that aren't coming as fast as we would like. And hopefully it'll change with whoever the next head coach is and whoever the next offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach are. But certainly there are areas where he can improve.
I will agree with regard to the fact that it's an overstatement to say you should push the panic button on him. You just have to also be considerate of everything that he has to work around. And we've talked about this ad nauseum. We know about all the guys that are missing. We know about the offensive line issues although the offensive line played very well today. But ultimately, some of the things that I've noticed, and I think we've all mentioned this as well. Yes, locking on to Keenan. He doesn't seem to have any trust for any of the other wide receivers outside of Slay. And you see that he doesn't throw with any anticipation because it almost feels like he doesn't even know if these guys are going to run the proper routes. You're still seeing situations where he's holding on to the ball. And I think that has something to do with the anticipation because he wants to ensure that the guy makes the correct break before he gets the ball out there. Because if the read's right, and you know where the wide receiver is supposed to go, then you should be able to throw it with anticipation, which means that you're probably going to get the wide out in a situation or a position where they can catch the ball out in front of them and maybe get some yards after the reception. I just firmly believe that Herbert has next to no trust in anyone outside of Keenan Allen, which is unfortunate because, I think it is hurting the offense to a degree. And I don't know if it's just a scenario where he just hasn't built up the chemistry with some of these guys. I mean, you would think with like a Donald Parham and a Gerald Everett, I don't see it happening as much, but it does affect them because ultimately I think if you're doing it with one receiver here and one there, then everyone kind of suffers for it. But the biggest knock that I have on him right now is the fact that things do seem very robotic and he is staring guys down and he's being late on the throws because he's not trusting where guys are going when they break. So that's my 2 cents on the Herbert situation. But also, again, keep in mind who he's throwing to right now and what he has to work with, because that's definitely a huge issue with the team.
That's what I was going to mention. I don't want to pile on. You guys said it all. Matthew Dahl, do Charger fans, should they feel positive with changes in this offseason? Would you guys, I mean, how could you not? Right? At least some changes help your current situation?
I mean, we got to see the changes made first. we can't guarantee they're going to be made. We think they will. We hope they will. But I think it depends on what changes they are and how they come about. Because the one change that really needs to be made, John Spanos, probably isn't going to be made. So if that is not made, how much impact does changing the coach or changing the GM have at the end of the day? Kind of like what Garrett talked about in his Score More this week. And we've talked about it for years. As long as John Spanos is sitting in that, president of football operations chair and everybody's answering to him, it's hard to get overly excited about any change because really nothing's changing. They're changing people, but the policies, the practices, the philosophies, a lot of that stuff probably isn't going to change unless they hire somebody like a Jim Harbaugh or somebody who can come in and say, no, if you're hiring me, this is my show. Get the hell out of my way. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what are you really getting? You're getting a first-year head coach, probably another first-time general manager, probably a guy like JoJo Wooden who's already indoctrinated in everything they do and the way they do it. And how much are things really going to change? So personnel can change, coach, general manager, those things can change, but John's got to go. And it's hard to get super excited about changes unless it's like a Jim Harbaugh without John going.
And Jamie pretty much covered all the bases. I mean, we know what the deal is with John. He's up there pulling the strings behind the curtain. And essentially, when we're talking about who they're going to have coming in at the end of the year going into a new season, I mean, I'm right there with Jamie as far as who the GM replacement would be. Probably going to be JoJo, just because it feels like they've been grooming him for it, like kind of behind the scenes. And you hear the name a lot when they're talking about personnel and scouting decisions and things of that nature. They need an alpha head coach. They're going to have a GM that can be more of the middleman. If they get rid of Telesco, there's going to be someone that the Spanos is like, and they have a relationship and feel comfortable with, and someone who can kind of like, again, essentially make everything palatable between head coach and upper management. But a guy like a Jim Harbaugh, who we've been championing, is the type of alpha mentality, alpha dog that the Chargers need a head coach. And if you're telling me you get a guy like that, or someone with some experience, a couple of, medals around their neck, I mean, if they have some sort of championship experience, whether they played in one and lost, or whether they've just had successful seasons elsewhere with other teams, and they have viable resumes that they can reference and show that they, I can get the job done. I've proven it. It's just going to be more of the same, because as of right now, throughout a few of these tenures with these head coaches and with Tom Telesco still in place, you're seeing the same things every single year. The same problems rear their heads. And then the Chargers have a tendency to attempt to overcorrect. And then that doesn't work out because they put so many resources towards the areas that they're looking to correct that others fall by the wayside. They're always playing catch up. They're never proactive. So, yeah, to me, it's going to take alpha head coach to come in and kind of like, direct traffic. And ultimately, John's going to have to get out of the way. But I don't see that happening, at least where John is concerned.
Yeah, the only way this works is if John takes a back seat. And I just don't think he's ever going to relinquish his power. He's always going to try to prove himself and not just, have the same storylines about nepotism and how he wasn't qualified and all the things that happen to be true. He's going to always try to fight against that. And the only way this works is if he takes a step back. And I don't know that happens, but if they get a coach like Harbaugh, somebody who's going to want to control the room and help put his stamp on the process, I think that's the only way this really can work, or you can at least have confidence that it will work.
I had something in the chat that I wanted to mention.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to bring this up. So I didn't want to skip it because I don't want people to think that we're going to avoid complaints or negative comments. So
read it.
Says,
yeah.
I know Discord gets the first dibs on inside info, but honestly, it leaves a huge cloud hanging in the air when you don't clarify on the pod. You guys are pros, and that's a crypto bro DraftKings approach. So I guess, is there a particular inside information thing that we're not clarifying? Because the typical cycle is something goes in the Discord, and then usually within like a week, it appears on After Hours or Mailbag or something. And we clarify it and talk about it at length. So I don't know if maybe I missed something when I stepped away for a minute, or if he's talking about something specific, but I feel like we do share everything at some point. Some stuff just has to wait and simmer before we can get to it, just based on the nature of what we're getting.
Yeah, I don't know what this is referring to, but
my only guess would be in reference to Staley. Most recent information that was discussed in there. I think we kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the show. When we're talking about win and loss in this game, like what might have been wanted. Someone actually mentioned it in the comments as well. I saw it kind of flash for a second. So
okay. Well, somebody clarify, or probable flaws. Come back in and clarify. We're not letting anything float. I think obviously if somebody said something, which I don't know who did, it was just kind of an offhanded comment. I don't think anybody was trying to sell the Discord or anything, because that's not our vibe, and we've always been forthright with any information we have. But yeah, things take time. Here's a question from MK Adams 99. Suppose the Bills fire Sean McDermott and the Giants fire Brian Daboll. Would you rather have McDermott as head coach and Daboll as OC, or Daboll as head coach and McDermott as DC? I think the first one. Dude, my dream would be having the Bills West. Having Daboll as offensive coordinator, McDermott as head coach. Sign me up. I don't know that we know that Dable's a good head coach at all. I know he had like a good year, but we know McDermott has success, proven success.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting McDermott as a DC anyway.
Oh
Like,
no, he's a head coach for sure.
If he does get fired, which I kind of doubt, but if he does,
Mhm.
he's getting a job somewhere else in a heartbeat. So I mean, he's
And
had
he
way
should.
too much success to take a step back like that.
I've heard and read that there is some unrest in New York with Dable and who's the DC? Wink Martindale? Is Wink the DC there? I think. Yeah, apparently the coaching staff isn't all that happy with him. He has a way that he addresses them that is less than I guess kind of talks to them in a way that would come
He
across
calls them
as
motherfuckers.
Yeah.
So I know that in some
There's a
old
baby
schools,
watching, Jamie.
told y'all, man, earmuffs. They're in some coaching circles, that old school approach to just talking crazy to coaches and whoever else on the team might fly. But we live in an age now where, I mean, unfortunately, guys, you know what? Let me not do that because I'm not shooting Dable any bail. As a second-year head coach in a situation that you're in, I understand you're trying to set a tone. You want to make some culture adjustments, but you probably shouldn't be calling grown men MFers. You probably shouldn't. I assume that that's not something that's received very well. But I also come from a school where, like, man, I had coaches who used to literally I had a coach who would turn his ring around and crack us in the back of the helmet. And then sometimes we wouldn't even have the helmet on. He would crack us in the back of the head. And that was just okay. But it's a different day and time. Same coach would curse the other head coaches out when things would go wrong. I'm accustomed to that. So to me, not so weird, but I know everyone probably doesn't like stuff like that. So I'm only speaking for myself.
I went through some of that stuff too, Craig. I got kicked in the balls to make sure I was wearing a cup in karate.
Always. Cup check.
Hit in the back with a bamboo sword and in the legs to make sure my stance was correct. So yeah, we've all been through stuff like that.
Definitely.
Like corporal punishment, man. But I mean, we're fine, right? We survived.
We're not condoning it, but sure, we survived.
No, but
there was a thing during high school football that to make sure you always strapped up and always had a helmet because they were keeping everybody safe. If you lost it, the closest coach would grab it and chuck it at you and you had to basically run because you're going to get a helmet chucked at your head.
Yeah.
That was their way of making sure to keep you safe, that you always have your helmet on, that you're going to get hit in the back of the head with a helmet.
I mean, stuff like, getting halfway through practice and if it sucked, restarting it, but starting it over with Oklahoma drills and then having practice afterwards, things like that,
Yeah.
Builds character.
It builds something. All right. So from Casey Linsmeyer, let's say we get what we are begging for, which is a new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, etc. What would be an acceptable timeline / learning curve time frame for the team to click?
Well, if we get what we're begging for and we get Jim Harbaugh, I would expect a cleaning of the house in terms of personnel and cutting salary. So I would say expect some guys to get cut, expect some guys to get traded, a hard reset. And I would say give him a year to get some people in place and be ready to compete at a pretty high level, to change the culture, find guys who are tougher and ready to be physical at the line of scrimmage, and guys who can fight through adversity because they don't have a lot of that right now.
And if he's hinting at what I think he might be hinting at, 12 weeks is too long. They should have clicked by now. If you're kind of alluding to Kellen Moore and the offense clicking.
I would not be shocked if
he might not be. I'm just saying. I'm just as an aside. 12 weeks is too long. They should have clicked like 10 weeks ago.
Yeah, at this point, some of the issues that are still showing themselves shouldn't be, but I mean, it's another conversation. But yeah, if we're talking about someone that has had some skin in the game in the NFL for a while and is established, I would say, yeah, definitely a year before you see some real significant change. And the team is one of the top 7 to 10 teams in the league. Yeah, a year. But if you get the right guy and have somewhat of a soft reset, they could actually still be competitive next year. There are ways to make that happen. I don't think there has to be a complete overhaul of the roster. There are going to be some significant changes. But if you're talking about guys developing in the offseason, the proper draft picks made, and you're not talking about third round projects or guys in the middle of the draft who come in and can't contribute whatsoever and end up in street clothes for 3/4 of the year. I'm not talking about Isaiah Spiller at all. You're talking a situation with someone who understands the game and how to build a team and how to develop players. This isn't a roster that's going to be devoid of talent next year. It'll just look different in specific areas. But if guys are properly developed and you bring in the right guys and young talent and fit them and put them in situations where they'll be more successful, the team can still compete next year. But at the very longest, a year before we're talking about like a real contender of a team.
And in terms of a timeline, we've talked about this before, but most new offenses and defenses have a month leeway, depending on what they have in terms of identity, talent on the field, scheme. Most teams have 4 weeks to kind of figure all that out. In terms of a learning curve time frame, you start to click around 4 weeks. So at minimum, they've got 4 games to kind of figure it out before they got to start putting it all together. So if you're talking about a literal time frame, you give it about a month and a half.
I think too, in terms of that 1 month time frame, I think that's a good rule of thumb just to start any season, because you're always fitting in new guys. There's always new wrinkles you're looking to add, whether it's a new system or not. There's always going to be some level of change. So being patient for the first 3 to 4 weeks and letting them figure things out, and hopefully they're not getting, the brake speed off them while they're figuring things out. I think that's a reasonable expectation just going into a season in general, regardless of a coaching change.
Do you guys from Oscar Castro, do you think Keenan Allen is a Hall of Fame player? You think he makes it to the Hall?
Yeah, I do. At this point, I don't see how that's really even a question. I mean, I know that some of these guys with votes, they play the politics game, but I don't see how that's a thing with Keenan. He's gone out there, like, as far as career receptions and overall total yards, I know that he's up there. I'm talking about with some of the best to do it. And again, you're talking about a guy who is essentially on an offense that has regularly been like top 10. He's been one of the key contributors in it. He puts up numbers virtually every year. And he's been one of the most consistent wide receivers in the NFL for quite some time. So I guess when you go and stack his numbers up against some of the guys that are already in there, to me, it's no question about it. Outside of just the numbers, just from a technique standpoint, and I've said this a million times over, he's arguably, to me, one of the top 5 route runners I've ever seen in football. And I'm a little bit of a football historian, so especially being a former wideout, things like that matter to me. And I've seen some of the best to do it and studied them extensively. And there aren't 5 better than Keenan Allen.
I think the thing that concerns me is the goalposts keep getting moved for the Hall of Fame. I think if you're looking at him in terms of a route runner and productivity, he's certainly a Hall of Famer. I think what concerns me a little bit, though, is he doesn't have a lot of touchdowns. He tends to disappear in big games. He has not been terribly productive in playoff games since he's been a Charger. And they've never won, really, with him on the roster. So in an era where you're holding a lack of team wins against quarterbacks, I think you're going to start seeing some of that stuff get held against skill players too. And I'm just curious to see how people look at him, because he's definitely, no doubt, one of the best route runners that we've seen in the last 15 or 20 years in the NFL. The man knows how to get himself open, and he does it without being particularly explosive or fast. He just gets open because he understands his job, and his footwork is phenomenal, and he knows how to find openings in the defense. But he does disappear at times against really good defenses, particularly against teams that can press him and get their hands on him. So we'll see. I think he's going to have Hall of Fame numbers. He probably should be in, but it just seems like, I don't know, lack of postseason success gets held against Chargers when they're up for Hall of Fame induction. So we'll see.
And I can also see him not being like a first ballot guy. Like, they play the politics game that way. I think he ultimately ends up getting in. I mean, especially if we're talking about like a year like this year, Who knows, what the next couple of years look like. I personally think that he can play at a high level for at least 2 more years with his skill set not really being based on athleticism at all. So we'll see long term. But I mean, if he isn't a first ballot Hall of Famer, I mean, I guess I could understand that, but I think he'll get in ultimately at some point.
Yeah, I don't think he's a first ballot, but I do think he's a Hall of Famer. He broke 1,000 yards today. It's his 6th of his career, I believe. And all those 100 catch seasons, I think he's going to go down as one of the, if not the best Chargers receiver of all time. And I think that's going to help push him a little bit, but the wins is going to be an issue, like not winning a Super Bowl. And the fact the Chargers were never all that good with him, would probably hurt his stock too, like Jamie's mentioning. So I do think it gets in, but I think it's going to take him a couple of years before they finally accept him. Because he is one of the best route runners I've ever seen in the last decade or two. He is just unbelievable. And again, the fact that he isn't a 4-4 guy and getting these 1,000-yard, 100 catch seasons, 1,000-yard seasons is just a testament of how good of a route runner he is.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is as the NFL continues to evolve and develop into more of a passing game where teams are not as focused on running the ball, some guys might get discounted just because of volume. And he's a volume guy. He's not a guy who's making 5 or 6 catches a game, putting up 120 yards and 2 scores. He's catching 8 to 10 balls a game and getting 90 to 100 yards. He is very much a volume guy, and the voters could hold that against him just because the offense, they've had good offenses with him, but the team hasn't been great. Is he elevating people around him? I don't really know how they're going to look at it, and his numbers could hurt him at some point just based on the volume.
Mm-hmm. Wheelie, I'm curious if you guys heard this. Wheelie said, did you guys hear on the radio broadcast that while Derwin was celebrating in the end zone after the sack, Matt came over and told him to stop? We haven't won yet. Did you hear that?
No, but I love it if he did because they celebrate way too goddamn much. They always have.
Yeah.
Those team celebrations when you're up by 6 or down by 10 or whatever.
Yeah, that's real vet influence. Real vet influence, and you're talking about someone who I think should definitely be around to continue to affect the culture. That's the type of player that you want around. So I'm all about it. Happy to hear it.
It's tough that the 2 best players right now for the Chargers are over 30 in Keenan and Mac.
Wild.
That does not bode well for the future. From the Wint family, what happened to the All In episodes? Not sure if you guys follow. Maybe they went all out. Cute little pun there at the end, but they just got nothing to show, right? I mean, nobody's going to watch it. That's the thing
at this point.
But doesn't that piss you off though? Like we're still doing 5 days a week here, and they're shooting these episodes. They've got camera crews around, and they're just not going to post them. I mean, what is that? Who cares if the numbers are going to be down?
They want me to be interested. They're going to have to get Martin Scorsese to direct the next few of them. Other than that, I don't care. Just trash it if you want to. I mean,
have you seen Killers of the Flower Moon yet?
I haven't, man. It's been a busy 2 weeks. I definitely want to go check it out, though.
I do too. Everybody says it's good, but it's like 3.5 hours.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I don't know. All those 3-hour movies, I feel like I walk out of there going, they probably could have cut a half hour out of that.
Did you guys see Oppenheimer?
No,
I still haven't.
I really want to see that.
I do. Yeah. I do also. I will. I'll get around to it. I'm hoping in the next week.
All right. Let's just fire off maybe a couple more questions and we'll get out of here. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. From Casey, unrelated, what are you guys' thoughts on the selection committee and the craziness in selecting those top 4 teams? Obviously, the big thing being Alabama in, Florida State undefeated out. How are you guys feeling about that?
I don't really care.
You don't care? Okay.
I mean, I was reading an article about it earlier, and I guess the committee said that, they didn't take Florida State because they're down to their 3rd quarterback and at best their 2nd quarterback, and they take rosters into account and availability, which sounds like a cop-out to me. I've always been a big believer that if you don't win your conference championship, you probably shouldn't be in the playoff. I think that should be the baseline.
Now, I mean, of course, some don't have a championship game. So, I mean, eliminating them that way, yeah. Well, I understand what you're getting at. Here's my issue. I don't think roster should be taken into account, but when you look at strength of schedule, who you've beaten, that should actually matter. Florida State, you know, playing in the ACC. Me being a Miami Hurricanes fan, so I got to see this firsthand. Like, you know, you beat up on some teams that aren't or weren't very good, or maybe they were ranked at the time you played them, and then they fell off of a cliff as the season went on. So those wins don't look as great as they once did. When you're talking about Alabama team that, of course, we know SEC is the darling of college football. You're talking about a Bama team that started off the season not looking so hot, had a poor QB situation. They were literally playing musical chairs at quarterback for like 2 or 3 games straight, go back to the original dude, and then start beating the brakes off of everyone. I mean, the Bama game was close, but that one is almost always close. I mean, not Bama game, sorry, the Auburn game. But Bama's beat some quality SEC teams, and that's almost going to trump anything. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that Florida State was down to their second or third string QB. But yeah, the roster being something that dictates whether or not they get in, I don't believe in that. But I just think that if we're just talking about strength of schedule, then it makes sense to me.
The only counter I have to that is Florida State, I think, had the 3rd best strength of schedule in the country, and they had two wins over SEC teams.
Are we talking come the end of the season? So we're talking when the season starts, the ranking for strength of schedule is whatever it's set at, and that's what
I just saw in the article that I read today that they had the 3rd best strength of schedule in the country.
Okay, so I think that, and I'll have to go back and relook at it. I mean, look at it all over again. But personally, I think that they're basing it's also recency bias involved in that too, by the way. So whenever teams get on the run towards the end of the season, and certain teams that they beat, specifically also the fact that Bama beat the number 1 team in the country, they were going to get extra points just for that anyway. So that's probably what got them pushed up into that 4th spot. I mean, I wouldn't have had a problem with Florida State being in one of the 4 teams. I just see the side that says that, you know, they feel that Bama played tougher competition. And I think some of the out of conference SEC teams that Florida State beat, I can't remember who they were. I think one was LSU, potentially, maybe. I don't remember exactly which SEC.
Yeah,
team
early in the season. Yeah. They beat them early in the season.
Okay.
Yep.
And you would think that would count for something now because, you know, LSU kind of got on a bit of a roll towards the end of the season. But there's all kind of politics that go on and stuff like that. And it's unfortunate because, you know, you got those kids that go out there and play their hearts out. You're an undefeated team in a Power 5 conference, and, you know, you're on the outside looking in because something as ridiculous as your quarterback going down affects whether or not you get in. So that's a stupid excuse. I mean, if you're going to talk about the schedules, I understand that, but you can't do that because a quarterback's out. That makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yeah, it's a cop-out. Yeah, not only do they have the strength of schedule, but Bama almost lost to Auburn from a Hail Mary in the corner of the end zone. You know, it's not like this is a team that's steamrolling all the competition going forward. And the fact that you're not going to let them in because of the quarterback, I mean, that's what makes in my mind, what makes college football so great is it could be some no-name, you know, walk-on that comes on, leads Florida State to a championship, and all he's got to do is win 2 games. They've got a pretty good defense over there. They're still getting wins and they're undefeated. I don't think that they should have let Alabama in. It felt like because it's Bama, they let Bama in the tournament. I really felt like Florida State earned it, and they should have. The fact that they lost a quarterback, it sucks, but still, I don't think they should have left them out.
If there's a chance that Nick Saban, if there's a chance that Nick Saban can get in the playoffs, they're going to make that happen.
Yeah, it sucks. All right. Well, I think that's pretty much it. I think we're good. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. Shout out to Wheeler and the newborn. Thank you for joining us. We'll be a little bit more quieter since you put him to sleep. And we will see you next week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Salute.